future wing sockets. Now that I've added all the bits I need to build up the body, I can give it a final once-over with the texturizers to fix the too smooth back and arms, and I can move on to adding the extra bits. I've made the wings by baking some little textured lumps onto the ends of some wound wires which fit nicely into my pre-poked wing sockets, and I can work my way down her spine, poking holes that I can then fill with some dragon-appropriate spinal spikes. These then of course get blended into the back and textured accordingly. To make her horns, I'll stick some little wound wires into the pre-poked horn holes, then build up a couple layers of clay until I've got an appropriately thick horn that I can bend into whatever shape I think fits her face the best. Additionally, I thought her face was a bit too bland and boring, so I worked my way around adding little horns and spikes as I saw fit. Otherwise, with the spikes in place, it's time to make her wings. I am picturing her wings being almost fully extended, triumphantly exclaiming her escape, but I know that these prototype wings are going to be way too flimsy. So I'll remove the prototype wings and make new wings using a single piece of wire bent back on itself and twist it into a tight spiral with the help of my drill. Then it's just a case of twisting and untwisting the wires until I've got a couple appropriately wing-looking wire contraptions. Some final posing to get the final pose I was envisioning, and I can start to cover the wing fingers in clay. I want to just barely cover the wire in clay to keep the weight to a minimum, but I also want to give this next step something to stick to. To make the webbing between the wingers, I've rolled out an extra thin, extra long sheet of clay pasta that I can then drape across the wing, cutting it to size so it fits between the wingers. I'll then repeat this step until I've built up the entire wing, at which point I can start to texturize the wings by pulling at the bottom to create some tears, as well as rolling various tools along the wings to create a less flat surface. Finally, some wing fingernails can be pressed into place wherever they need to be, and a last quick bit of scaly texture with my scale rollers, and that's one lovely, large half-dragon ready for painting. Before I paint Jean though, I'm going to chop away a bit of her bottom section because when I build the portal, I want her to be sitting in the center of it rather than at the bottom. By removing a couple centimeters from her base, she should be able to sit with her hands on the blocks later. Now, as far as painting goes, I want to warn you that I did not have any idea what I was going to do, which is why I'm kind of all over the place. The Ender Dragon is traditionally black on black with a tiny bit of gray, but even for me, that's kind of boring. So once I base coated in black, I gave her whole body a couple of varying shades of purple dry brushing to bring out the detail in the scales before getting to work and graying all of her various spiky bits. I started with the gray base coat followed by a lighter gray wet blended into the tips for a lovely little spiky gradient. Finally, I followed all that up with another dry brushing in lighter gray to highlight the gnarly texture on the spikes. I wanted to lean into the ethereal purple glow, so I worked my way around her body, blasting a bright white ink into the various recesses in her plates and inside her mouth and around her nose and eyes before coming back with a light purple to add what I hoped would be a sort of glowy effect when it was added to all the white bits. It kinda worked around her mouth and eyes, but in the end there was just too much purple on her chest, so I ended up repainting it black anyways. Lesson learned, I'll stick with the black on the wings by giving the wingers a full black base coating, letting a little spray out onto the wings since that will let me create a smooth dark gradient between the black and the purple that I want to paint the webbing with. However, once I finish that, I remembered that Jean's wingers are white, so I'll repaint the wingers white, letting a little spray out onto the wings since that will let me create a smooth light gradient between the white and the purple that I want to paint the webbing with. I am, however, going to add that original dark purple back into the webbing, followed by straight up black in the center to create a light purple to pure black gradient. I'll then set my airbrush to the lowest setting and spit some white ink onto the webs, creating what I think is some pretty excellent celestial looking end-of-the-world dragon wings. And with that, my dragon is all but done, which means it's time to make a portal. Fortunately, I know I need my blocks to be the same size as my sculpting block, so I'll split this little block of foam into perfectly sized little cubes.